Have you ever wondered why? In the moments that seem to be the most peaceful in your life, when everything on the outside is completely quiet, your mind is still screaming violently inside? We are living in a world that teaches people how to achieve success, how to conquer the peaks of society, yet rarely teaches us the most important skill: how to face and master the inner storms that are quietly destroying our mental health every single day. There is a painful paradox. On the outside, you may appear as solid as a rock, yet inside you are torn apart by endless waves of toxic thoughts and never-ending loops of overthinking. You are trapped between anxiety about a future that hasn't arrived and torment over a past that is already gone. And in the process, you lose the mental clarity you need for the present. But the shocking truth that few people realize is this: you are not those thoughts. The judging voices in your head are not the truth. They are just automatic reactions born from fear. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, a great symbol of Stoicism, once left us a timeless reminder: the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. So how do we stop identifying ourselves with these chaotic thoughts? How do we find true inner peace instead of temporary escape? Today, we are not going to talk about empty theories. We will go deep into the nature of the mind together, practice mindfulness to detach from illusions, and most importantly, understand a liberating truth: thoughts are not facts. The journey to rediscover stillness and reclaim mastery over your life begins right now. Today, we're not going to talk about escaping reality or searching for temporary sedatives for the soul. Instead, we're going to step into a journey of discovering one of the most profound and liberating truths about the way you see life: the separation between who you are and the stream of thoughts constantly flowing through your mind. This is the meeting point, where ancient Stoicism and modern psychology intersect, forming a solid foundation for your mental health and the resilience of your inner world. In a modern society that glorifies speed and efficiency, we are thoroughly taught how to accumulate knowledge, wealth, and status. But ironically, no one teaches us the most important skill for maintaining balance: the skill of letting go. We are not equipped with the tools to release invisible burdens, to clear out toxic thoughts, or simply to sit still with ourselves without feeling restless. As a result, our mind becomes a chaotic storage room, filled with unfinished thoughts, invisible fears, and the constant noise of judgment. Today's topic revolves around redefining your relationship with your mind. We often assume that every voice that rises in our head is the truth, that it is me, but the very nature of overthinking and suffering usually begins with this mistaken identification. Together, we will analyze how the mind operates through the lens of self-awareness, to realize that thoughts are not evidence, and emotions are not commands. They are just passing phenomena, echoes of the past or worries about the future, not the essence of who you are. The relevance of this topic in our current world is undeniable. As we are constantly bombarded with information and pressure, the ability to maintain mental clarity is no longer a luxury. It's a survival need. Without focus and clarity, we will forever remain slaves to automatic reactions and the control of the inner critic. In this video, we will dive deep into dissecting the storms of the mind, learning how to practice mindfulness not as a trend, but as a disciplined method to rediscover stillness. We will explore how to become a wise observer, someone who can see anger, sadness, or insecurity rising up, yet refuses to be swept away by that waterfall. This is the journey from being controlled by what you think to deeply understanding that thoughts are not facts. Get ready for a serious self-reflection. What we're about to discuss is not empty theory, but core principles that help you activate emotional healing, build an inner world that stays unshaken in a constantly changing life, and most importantly, reclaim the highest form of freedom within your own mind. To truly understand the root of our inner conflicts, we need to embark on a journey back through time, returning to the most primitive nature of the human mind. What you're experiencing right now, the anxiety, the endless stream of toxic thoughts, the suffocating feeling of overthinking, is not some new disease born from the digital age. It is an inseparable part of the human condition, a silent battle that has been raging for thousands of years. The history of human thought, especially the school of Stoicism that emerged in ancient Greece and Rome, recognized this fatal flaw in our psychological structure very early on. Stoic philosophers lived through eras of extreme turbulence, where war, plague, and political collapse were everyday realities. In that context, they realized that human beings do not suffer because of external events, but because of the way the mind reacts to them. Epictetus, a freed slave who became one of the greatest philosophers, distilled this truth into his classic statement: "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the view which they take of them." This sentence laid the foundation for the entire concept of modern mental health and cognitive behavioral therapy. It shows us that the absence of inner peace does not come from a harsh reality, but from our lack of ability to control and filter the judgments inside our own heads. However, the tragedy of modern humanity lies here. Our education system and society are designed to be completely outward-focused. We spend nearly the first 2 decades of our lives learning how to solve logical problems, how machines operate, and how to hit economic targets. Yet we remain completely illiterate when it comes to inner education. No one teaches us what self-reflection truly is, or how to practice letting go when pain arrives. We possess some of the most intelligent brains in history, yet we allow the inner critic, the harsh voice inside, to run wild without any defense system. By evolutionary design, the human brain is programmed for survival, not for happiness. It constantly scans the environment for danger, and when there is no physical threat, it begins to manufacture psychological ones. Hypothetical scenarios, fears of not being good enough, and torment over the past. This is the point where the lack of mental clarity becomes severe. We start to identify ourselves with this fearful survival machine. We believe that the thoughts screaming inside our head are absolute truth, forgetting the foundational principle that thoughts are not facts. This destructive confusion is the source of all our insecurity. That's why the framework of today's video is not built on a single theory, but on the integration of ancient Stoic wisdom about calmness and modern psychological understanding of how the brain works. We return to these origins not to blame the past or blame creation, but to recognize this. Chaos is instinct, but stillness and emotional healing are skills. And skills can absolutely be trained if we have enough focus and clarity to begin. We begin our journey of dissecting the mind with the most fundamental principle, a truth powerful enough to completely change the trajectory of your mental health and the way you experience life. This is not just a psychological technique, but an awakening of self-awareness. You are not your thoughts. It sounds simple, but this is one of the hardest concepts for modern people to truly grasp. Most of us live our entire lives in a state of complete fusion with the voice in our head. When an anxious thought appears, we immediately believe we are in danger. When a self-deprecating thought arises, we automatically conclude that we are inadequate. We cannot distinguish between what is reality and what is merely the mind's interpretation of that reality. We become victims of the very stories the mind weaves, swept away by the flood of overthinking, without ever realizing that we have the right to stand on the shore and simply watch the water flow. This first core principle demands that we redefine our relationship with our inner world. Thoughts are not commands. They are not self-evident truths, and they are certainly not your true essence. They are simply psychological phenomena, electrical impulses in the brain, echoes of memories, and biological reactions triggered by habit. To attain true mental clarity, we need a deep understanding of the nature of toxic thoughts and how they operate. The human mind, through millions of years of evolution, was not designed to keep you peaceful or happy. It was designed to keep you alive. That is why it functions like a constantly sweeping radar system, always scanning for potential threats, exaggerating risks, and replaying past failures over and over in an attempt to extract lessons. This is why the inner critic, the judgmental voice inside, is so loud and so clear. It is not deliberately trying to harm you. It is trying to protect you in a distorted and outdated way. It believes that by criticizing you, it can prevent mistakes and protect you from rejection. However, the problem begins when we treat this survival data as absolute truth. This is the mind's greatest trap: identification. When you say, "I am sad," you are identifying your entire being with that emotion. But the more accurate language of mindfulness would be, "I am experiencing a wave of sadness passing through." That subtle shift in language reflects a massive shift in awareness. One is drowning, the other is separation and observation. Eckhart Tolle, one of the great contemporary spiritual teachers, describes this realization brilliantly. The moment you start watching the thinker, a higher level of consciousness becomes activated. You then begin to realize that there is a vast realm of intelligence beyond thought. That thought is only a tiny aspect of that intelligence. When you begin watching the thinker, you activate a higher layer of consciousness. You start to realize that there are two entities coexisting. First, the noisy, chaotic stream of thoughts that is constantly narrating, complaining, and predicting. And second, you, the silent awareness, the one who is listening to that voice. You are the vast, clear blue sky, wide, deep, unchanging. Your thoughts and emotions are just passing dark clouds. The clouds may cover the sky, they may bring storms, but they can never stain or alter the nature of the sky itself. The sky is always there, behind the clouds, holding an eternal stillness. Understanding that thoughts are not facts is the key that unlocks the prison of anxiety. Thoughts are merely proposals from the brain, not verified truths. When your mind says, "Everything is going to go wrong," that is not a prophecy. It is just a hypothesis born from fear. When your mind says, "You're not good enough," that is not a life sentence. It is an old recording playing on repeat, coming from past wounds that have not yet received emotional healing. If you treat every thought as truth, you will live in a constant state of red alert. But if you view them simply as mental events, you reclaim your power to choose how to respond. Why is this so crucial for your focus and clarity in modern life? Because your energy is finite. Every time you struggle with, wrestle with, or try to suppress a negative thought, you are burning a massive amount of energy. We often attempt to solve problems by thinking more about them. But that very overthinking is the fuel feeding the fire. We cannot use the mind to heal the mind. We need a point of leverage that lies outside of thought. That leverage is pure awareness. Pure awareness. In Stoic philosophy, this concept is closely related to prohairesis, the faculty of choice, the ability to give or withhold assent to impressions. The Stoics taught that we do not control the first impressions, the initial thoughts or emotions that spontaneously arise. but we have absolute power in deciding whether to agree with them or not. Free will does not lie in preventing thoughts from appearing, but in the space between stimulus and response. Viktor Frankl, a survivor of Nazi concentration camps and the founder of logotherapy, captured this power in a single profound sentence. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. That space is exactly where inner peace lives. When you practice stepping back from the stream of thought, you are expanding that space. Instead of reacting instantly to anger or fear, you pause and observe it the way a scientist observes a specimen under a microscope. You become curious about it instead of terrified by it. Ah, this is anxiety. It's making my heart beat faster. It's telling me a story about failure. You acknowledge its presence, but you do not become it. This is also the first step of letting go. Letting go is not about throwing thoughts away or denying them. You cannot let go of something you are still clinging to. You can only let go once you realize you're holding on. Identifying your thought patterns and your triggers is a crucial part of this process. Toxic thoughts often operate in patterns. They have their own scripts and specific timings to show up, usually when you are tired, hungry, or lonely. Recognizing these patterns means you are no longer surprised or overwhelmed when they appear. You begin to see them as familiar visitors, unpleasant perhaps, but no longer terrifying. In short, this first core principle does not demand that you stop thinking, empty your mind, or instantly reach some extraordinary meditative state. It simply asks you to change where you stand. Step off the stage where the tragic play of the mind is unfolding, and take a seat in the audience. Become the observer. When you do this, you begin to realize that the peace you've been chasing does not depend on changing external circumstances, but on your ability to remain still inside, even while thoughts continue to rise and fall. This is the foundation of self-reflection and the first step of any true healing. To truly grasp this core principle, we need to step out of abstract definitions and walk straight into the vivid reality of the mind. Imagine your mind as a busy highway during rush hour. The cars speeding along it are your thoughts. Some of these cars are beautiful, carrying joy and hope. But others are old, noisy, spewing thick black smoke. These represent your toxic thoughts, your fears, and your inner torment. Most of us are living our lives by throwing ourselves right into that traffic. We try to block the ugly cars, chase after the shiny ones, and as a result, we end up exhausted, bruised, and panicked in the middle of chaotic lanes. That is exactly what the absence of mental clarity looks like. We are swept away and battered by the very things our mind creates. But mindfulness and Stoicism invite you to do something entirely different. Instead of running into the road, gently step onto the grassy shoulder, find a tree, and sit down. You still see the traffic. You still hear the noise. But you are no longer inside the flow. You are observing it. When a car drives by with a license plate that reads anxiety, instead of jumping into it and letting it carry you straight into the land of panic, you simply note, an anxious thought is passing by. And then you let it go. That is stillness. This stillness doesn't mean the traffic must stop. It means you have stopped chasing it. Let's look at a real-life situation most of us have experienced. Imagine you've just sent an important email for work or a message to someone you care about, and hours go by with no reply. Immediately, the overthinking machine switches on. At first, it's just a gentle thought. They're probably busy. But if you lack self-awareness, you will unconsciously fuse with the next wave of thoughts. The inner critic starts speaking up. Maybe I said something wrong. They don't respect me. Or worse, I'm such a failure. I'm not worth anyone's attention. Your heart rate rises. Your chest tightens. You start to feel hurt, angry, or afraid. The external reality is very simple. There is no reply yet. But inside your mind, a disaster movie about rejection and failure is already playing. This is exactly where you need to apply the mantra. Thoughts are not facts. If you apply the observer principle in this moment, the entire script changes. When the thought, "they don't like me," appears, instead of believing it instantly, you take one step back. You engage in pattern recognition. You tell yourself, "I'm having a thought that they don't like me. This is an old pattern that usually shows up when I feel insecure." By labeling that thought, you strip it of its power. You create a safe distance so your mental health is not attacked by baseless assumptions. You recognize that this thought is just a fear response, not a verified truth about your relationship. Another deeper example involves facing major emotional storms. Think of the sky and the weather. Your awareness, the mind that knows, is the wide, open blue sky. Your painful emotions, anger, grief, despair, are the storms. An untrained person will think, "I am this storm, I am this anger." They allow the storm to sweep away everything, destroying relationships and inner peace. But someone with focus and clarity understands. No storm, no matter how violent, can last forever. And more importantly, the storm cannot harm the sky. The sky is simply the space in which the storm appears. When you practice letting go, it doesn't mean you try to push the storm away, because the more you push, the more pressure builds. It means you are willing to be the sky. You allow the anger to be there. You feel its heat, the trembling in your body, but you do not act on its impulses. You watch it rage until it burns out its own fuel and dissolves. This is the pinnacle of emotional healing. The ability to sit still in the fire of emotion without being burned. This separation also helps you recognize the scripts that keep repeating in your life. Have you ever noticed that the inner critic attacks you the hardest at very specific times? Usually when you're tired at the end of the day, when you're sick, or when you've just failed at something small. That's when the mind pulls out an old cassette tape. You'll never make it. You're a failure. If you believe these words are true, you will collapse. But if you treat them as spam mail from the brain, your attitude changes. You don't open those emails to read them. You don't analyze them. You don't argue with them. You simply hit delete or let them slide straight into the junk folder. You understand that these thoughts don't show up because you're worthless, but because your brain is tired and has defaulted back to its negative setting. This self-reflection process does not happen overnight. It's like training a muscle. The first time you try to observe your thoughts, you'll get swept away almost immediately. You'll forget you're the observer in less than 3 seconds. That's completely normal. In fact, the very moment you realize, "I just got carried away," is already a moment of awakening. Remember the story of the farmer who lost his horse in Eastern philosophy? A classic example of not labeling things as good or bad and keeping the mind calm. When his horse ran away, the neighbors said, "What bad luck." The old man simply replied, "Maybe." When the horse returned, bringing a whole herd of wild horses with it, the neighbors exclaimed, "What good luck!" Again, he just said, "Maybe." He didn't let his mind swing up and down with external events, nor did he allow others' judgments to define his reality. He kept an unshakable inner peace because he did not identify himself with circumstances. Applied to modern life, when you're stuck in traffic and late for work, your mind screams, "This is a disaster! My boss is going to kill me!" That's just noise. Reality is simply, I'm sitting in the car isn't moving, I'm going to be late. When you separate the event from the story your mind is spinning, you feel the stress drop significantly. You regain control and can decide your next step with clarity instead of panicking for no reason. In short, the message of this section is very clear. You are the owner of the house of your mind, not a guest, and definitely not the intruders making all the noise. Thoughts are just visitors, some pleasant, some unpleasant. Your job is to greet them, observe them, and then open the door for them to leave. Don't invite them to stay for tea. Don't blindly believe the stories they tell, and most importantly, don't let them steal your throne. When you can do this, you will discover a subtle yet immense inner power, one that allows you to stand firm through every storm life sends your way. If the first principle helps us realize that we are not the chaotic stream of thoughts in our mind, then this second principle gives us the most powerful tool to face them. We now step into one of the most misunderstood concepts in the modern world, practicing stillness and the power of non-reaction. When we talk about stillness, most of us picture a monk meditating in a cave high up in the mountains, or a state where all noise disappears. No car horns, no deadlines, no pressure. But that is a definition of escape, not mastery. The true stillness that Stoicism and depth psychology point to does not depend on external conditions. It is an inner state, a capacity to stand firm in the eye of the storm, where you can maintain inner peace even when the world around you, and even your own mind, is collapsing. The core principle here is this: stillness is not about making the mind stop thinking. It is about stopping your automatic reactions to those thoughts. In daily life, we usually operate on autopilot. Something happens, stimulus, and we immediately act, reaction. Someone says something harsh, and we instantly get angry. A new email notification pops up, and we instantly feel anxious. We become puppets pulled by strings, controlled by the outside world and by the toxic thoughts running silently in the background. We lose our mental clarity because we're trapped in a loop of conditioned reflexes. Practicing stillness is the art of creating a sacred pause between stimulus and reaction. It is the moment you refuse to be dragged into the drama of your emotions. When a wave of anxious thoughts hits, instead of immediately believing it and diving into overthinking, you choose to pause. You take a deep breath and draw a boundary. You notice the anxiety rising, but you don't jump into it. This act of doing nothing, in terms of reaction, is, ironically, the most powerful thing you can do to protect your mental health. The Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who had to govern the entire Roman Empire through war and plague, did not find this stillness by abandoning his throne, but by withdrawing into himself. He wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." The retreat within the soul that Marcus speaks of is the space of pure observation. Why is this so crucial for emotional healing? Because most of our psychological wounds don't come from the actual event, but from the way we keep scratching that wound with repetitive, tormenting thoughts. When we stop reacting, we stop feeding pain with energy. We allow the wound to rest so it can heal. To achieve focus and clarity, we need to understand that the human mind is like a lake. When you try to flatten the surface of the lake by smacking the water with your hands, that is, by struggling with or suppressing your thoughts. You only create more ripples and chaos. The only way for the lake to become calm again is to do nothing. Let the mud sink. Let the ripples fade on their own. That is the essence of letting go. Letting go here is not a passive or weak act. It is a ruthless mental discipline to refrain from interfering where interference only makes things worse. However, the biggest barrier that keeps us from this stillness is the fear of emptiness. Modern humans are addicted to busyness. We're afraid of being alone with ourselves. When there's nothing to do, we scroll our phones, seek entertainment, and fill every gap with noise. Why? Because when everything becomes quiet, the voice of the inner critic grows louder than ever. Old insecurities, questions about the meaning of life, and unhealed pain all begin to surface. And this is exactly where self-awareness comes into play. Instead of running away from those moments, this principle encourages you to stay with the discomfort. Stillness forces you to face the hidden corners of your soul that you've been avoiding for years. It is a painful but necessary process of self-reflection. You'll realize that the monsters in your head are only terrifying when you run from them. When you turn around, look them in the eye and say, "I see you, but you don't control me." They begin to lose their power. Another key aspect of this principle is the distinction between reaction and response. Reaction is instinct. It's the ego's defense mechanism, usually fast, impulsive, and lacking wisdom. Response is a choice of intelligence, slow, thoughtful, and based on your core values. Mindfulness helps us move from reacting to responding. When you train your mind to remain still in the midst of turbulence, you develop what people often call inner strength or grit. Grit doesn't mean you feel no fear. It means you don't let fear take the wheel. You begin to see that thoughts are not facts. They are just dark clouds, and you don't have to run from the rain. You can stand there, soaked, and still be completely at peace. In today's world, where our attention is torn apart by thousands of pieces of information every day, the ability to practice stillness becomes a superpower. It helps you filter out useless noise and focus on what truly matters. It keeps you from being dragged into pointless arguments on social media, from being shaken by artificial standards of success, and from being drained by constantly comparing yourself to others. Remember, the mind is always craving drama. It loves creating problems just so it can solve them. But when you practice stillness, you are telling your mind, "We don't need drama anymore. We are safe." Gradually, your nervous system learns how to relax. Cortisol levels drop. Clarity rises. You begin to see life not through the lens of fear and scarcity, but through the lens of wholeness and wisdom. In summary, this second principle is an invitation to step out of the insane whirlpool of the mind. Don't try to block the flow of thoughts. Let them pass. But don't swim after them. Don't try to cover your ears from the noise of the world. Find silence right in the heart of the storm. That stillness is the firmest foundation on which to build a meaningful life, because only when the waters of the mind are calm can they clearly reflect the stars of wisdom and love. That is the path to true freedom. To bring the concept of stillness down from the page into the rushing flow of real life, let's begin with an ancient metaphor that has never lost its relevance: the muddy glass of water. Imagine your mind, when it's triggered, as a glass of water filled with dirt that has just been stirred violently. The water is murky, chaotic, and you can't see the bottom. In this state of lost mental clarity, our instinctive reaction is usually to stick our hand into the glass, trying to push the mud aside, or to grab a spoon and stir in the opposite direction, hoping to clear it. But paradoxically, the more we interfere, the murkier the water becomes. The more frantically you think in an attempt to solve your anxiety, the deeper you fall into the trap of overthinking. What is the only way for the water to become clear again? It is to do nothing at all. Place the glass on the table and wait. Over time, under the natural pull of gravity, the mud will settle to the bottom, and the water will turn clear again. That is stillness. Stillness is not passive inaction. It is the deliberate choice to wait until chaos settles so that wisdom can arise. Let's apply this principle to a typical workplace situation that anyone can relate to. Imagine you're in a tense meeting. A colleague suddenly publicly criticizes the project you've poured months of effort into. Their words are sharp, laced more with personal attack than constructive feedback. Immediately, your body reacts. Your heart races, your ears burn, your stomach tightens. The inner critic in your head starts screaming, "He's humiliating me. Everyone thinks I'm a failure." A tidal wave of toxic thoughts crashes in, pushing you to strike back right away, to argue, to prove them wrong, or to say something cutting in return. Without mindfulness, you will follow that urge. You'll lash out and say things in anger that you'll almost certainly regret later. You've allowed the external situation to fully control your behavior. But if you apply the principle of non-reaction, the entire script changes. In that moment of attack, you activate awareness. You notice the anger rising, but you choose not to identify with it. You tell yourself, "This is the feeling of being attacked. This is anger. But I am not this anger." You stay silent. This silence is not cowardice or weakness. It is a fortress protecting your inner peace. You wait. You take deep breaths to steady your heartbeat. When you refuse to react immediately, you strip the provocateur of their energy. More importantly, you allow the mud to settle. A few minutes later, or maybe a few hours later, once your mental health has stabilized, you'll be able to see that criticism with a completely new focus and clarity. You may realize there is a useful piece of truth buried in it. Or you may see that the other person is under pressure themselves and is dumping their frustration onto you. At that point, your response will be one of wisdom and dignity, not the blind reaction of a wounded animal. Marcus Aurelius left us a beautiful illustration of this attitude in Meditations. Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it. Be that cliff. Emotional waves, whether from within or from the outside, will always crash against you. They are loud, wild, and foaming. But the cliff never fights the waves. It doesn't scream back. It doesn't try to run away. It simply stands there, steady and unmoved. In the end, it is the cliff's steadfastness that tames the violent water. In personal relationships, this principle is the key to emotional healing. We often hurt the people we love most because we react too quickly to things they say in moments of anger or exhaustion. A careless sentence can trigger old wounds from the past, making us feel abandoned or disrespected. Instead of seeing reality clearly, they're tired and raising their voice. We let old pain write the story. They don't love me anymore. Practicing letting go in this situation means releasing the need to win the argument, releasing the need to be validated immediately. When you choose stillness instead of trading blow for blow, you create a safe space for both of you. You break the cycle of mutual wounding. You'll realize that sometimes the greatest strength doesn't lie in the sharpest comeback, but in the ability to remain peaceful while the storm passes. Another powerful example of applying stillness is in how we deal with the inner critic, our most persistent inner enemy. Picture those sleepless nights when your mind starts replaying a highlight reel of past mistakes. Why did you say that 5 years ago? You're pathetic. This is when thoughts are not facts, must be applied relentlessly. Instead of arguing with that voice, instead of dissecting why you were wrong, try the method of silent observation. Imagine those judgmental thoughts as trains passing through a station. You are standing on the platform. You see the self-blame express rumbling by, old, noisy, ugly. You don't need to jump on. You simply stand there and watch it pass. You don't feed it with your energy. Gradually, as it's no longer fueled by your attention and fear, that voice grows weaker and fades into the night. Ultimately, stillness gives us an invaluable gift. Freedom. Freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. True freedom is the ability to master yourself in every circumstance. When you're no longer jerked around by praise and criticism, no longer controlled by temporary emotional storms, only then do you truly become the author of your life. That is when you reach the highest level of self-awareness. You know who you are, and more importantly, you know who you are not. You are not the chaos. This unshakable steadiness is the foundation upon which you can build a deeper, more meaningful life in a turbulent modern world. If the first two principles help us step out of the chaotic stream of thoughts and reclaim our inner stillness, then this third principle takes us into a deeper, darker, and more painful layer of the mind. It is about facing the harshest judge you will ever meet, overcoming the inner critic and embracing imperfection. On the journey toward mental health and inner stability, we often discover a paradoxical truth. The cruelest person to us is not an enemy out there, but the voice that rises inside our head every time we fall. That is the inner critic. This voice never rests. It whispers when you look in the mirror, it screams when you make a mistake at work, and it torments you for hours as you're trying to fall asleep. It tells you that you're not good enough, not smart enough, not attractive enough, and that you don't deserve to be happy. This third core principle demands a radical shift in perception. You don't need to destroy the inner critic, but you must never let it drive your life. To do this, we first need to dissect the nature of these judgmental, toxic thoughts. That criticizing voice is not the truth, and it is not your moral conscience. From an evolutionary psychology perspective, it is a survival mechanism that has gone out of sync with the modern world. In ancient times, the fear of being rejected by the tribe equaled death. So the brain developed a hypersensitive warning system to stop us from doing anything too different. Today, that same mechanism has mutated into toxic comparison and extreme perfectionism. This voice is fed by unrealistic social expectations, childhood wounds, and the pressure to succeed at any cost. It continually compares your messy behind the scenes with everyone else's polished stage. When you lack mental clarity, you will believe its accusations. You believe that if you punish yourself hard enough, you'll somehow become better. But this is a grand illusion. Shame and self-hatred have never been a solid foundation for sustainable growth. They only lead to paralysis and emotional exhaustion. The philosopher Seneca, one of the pillars of Stoicism, gave us an invaluable piece of advice about our relationship with ourselves. What progress, you ask, have I made? I have begun to be a friend to myself. Becoming a friend to yourself, on the surface it sounds simple, but it is one of the hardest achievements of a human life. It requires you to practice letting go of the illusion of perfection. We often think that to attain inner peace, we must become flawless. No mistakes, no weaknesses, no scars. In reality, it's the opposite. Peace only arrives when you fully accept your own imperfection. This principle teaches us, you are allowed to be wrong. Failure is not proof of your worthlessness. It is proof that you are alive, that you are trying, that you are experiencing. The inner critic constantly tries to convince you that one small mistake is the catastrophe of your entire life. It magnifies the consequences and erases every past achievement. The task of self-awareness is to recognize this exaggeration and bring reality back to its true side. Another important aspect of this principle is the shift from fighting to understanding. Many people try to suppress the negative voice with shallow positive affirmations, what we might call toxic positivity. But that rarely works in the long run. The more you try to push the spring down, the harder it rebounds. Instead, treat the inner critic like a frightened child. Its aggression is really just armor for its fear. The fear of being hurt, of failing, of not being enough. When that voice says, "You're going to ruin everything," instead of panicking or getting angry, use focus and clarity to ask, why am I feeling this way? Is there real evidence that I'm going to fail, or is this just an old fear replaying itself? This process of self-reflection helps you step out of identification with the judge. You turn inner monologue into inner dialogue. Furthermore, we need to understand that emotional healing does not mean completely eliminating negative thoughts. There will always be days when you feel awful, moments when you doubt yourself. That's normal. Inner strength is not about never falling. It's about how quickly you get back up after a fall. And you can only get up quickly if you don't kick yourself while you're already on the ground. Facing overthinking fueled by self-judgment also requires us to redefine our sense of self-worth. The inner critic tends to tie your worth to external factors, achievements, money, admiration from others. When those things disappear, you collapse. But both Stoic philosophy and modern psychology guide us back to inner values: character, effort, and compassion. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Applied to the inner critic, the pain does not come from the fact that you made a mistake, but from your judgment that the mistake is unforgivable. You have the power to revoke that judgment at any moment. You have the right to say, "I was wrong and I will learn from it, but I am not that mistake." This is the heart of thoughts, are not facts. True stillness cannot exist if there is a civil war raging inside you. You will not find peace anywhere, not in a temple, not on a beach, if you carry an enemy in your own head. Therefore, the only path forward is to sign a peace treaty with yourself. That treaty might include terms like, I accept that I am a human being with real flaws. I commit to speaking to myself with the same kindness I would offer a close friend. I understand that perfection is the enemy of progress. When you begin to practice this principle, you'll notice a profound shift. The energy you once spent on self-torment is freed up for creativity and growth. The heaviness in your chest lightens. You dare to take more risks because you know that no matter the outcome, you will still be there for yourself, not to punish, but to support. Finally, remember this. The inner critic is loud and noisy, while the voice of intuition and wisdom is usually soft and gentle. To hear that quieter voice, you need the space of mindfulness. You must train your ability to listen to what is whispering beneath the roar of insecurity. That is where your true self lives, a self that is strong, compassionate, and absolutely worthy of love. In short, this third principle does not ask you to become complacent or to shirk responsibility. It calls you to build an inner discipline rooted in love rather than fear. Only when you stop fighting against yourself can you truly fight for your dreams. To clearly picture the level of destruction caused by the inner critic, I want to invite you into a small but deeply haunting thought experiment. Imagine you have a roommate or a personal assistant who follows you 24/7. The moment you wake up and look in the mirror, this person leans in and whispers in your ear, "You look terrible. Look at those dark circles under your eyes. You're getting old and nobody cares about you." As you're getting ready for work, this person murmurs, "You're definitely going to mess up that meeting today. Everyone is going to find out you're incompetent." When you make a small mistake like spilling your coffee, this person shouts, "Useless. You can't even do that one simple thing right." The question is, how long would you tolerate this roommate? A day? An hour? Or would you kick them out of your life immediately to protect your mental health? The answer is obvious. You would never accept that kind of abuse from anyone else. So why do we allow ourselves to talk to ourselves in that toxic way every single day for decades? This is the reality of millions of people who lack self-awareness. We live with that invisible abuser and convince ourselves that those harsh criticisms are motivation to grow. In truth, it's like trying to drive a car while slamming the brakes the entire time. Let's look at a specific example: imposter syndrome, one of the inner critic's favorite weapons. Imagine you've just been promoted or given a challenging new project. Instead of feeling proud, your mind is immediately invaded by toxic thoughts. They picked the wrong person. I just got lucky. Sooner or later, they'll find out I'm not good enough. You start staying up late, overthinking, rereading every email you've sent, replaying every word you've said. You work yourself to exhaustion, not out of passion, but out of fear of being exposed. In this state, you completely lose focus and clarity. Your energy is drained into building defensive walls instead of creating and contributing. If you apply the principle, "Thoughts are not facts," to this situation, you change the tone of the conversation. When that voice says, "You're a fraud," you pause, breathe, and activate mindfulness. You respond, "Thank you for the warning. I know you're afraid I'll fail. But the truth is, I worked to earn this position, and I am capable of learning." You don't fight it, but you don't agree with it either. You transform fear into healthy caution. Another beautiful metaphor that illustrates emotional healing and the acceptance of imperfection is the Japanese art of kintsugi. When a precious bowl breaks, instead of throwing it away or trying to hide the cracks, artisans use liquid gold to mend the pieces. The result is a bowl that is even more beautiful and valuable because of its fractures. Those golden veins become its history, its pride. Our soul is the same. The inner critic wants you to believe that your scars and past failures make you damaged and worthless. But Stoic philosophy and the spirit of kintsugi teach us that those painful experiences, if healed with understanding and compassion, form a stronger, more resilient version of you. A person who has never fallen has never truly lived. Perfection is like a flawless bowl with no story. Maturity is a bowl filled with golden lines of experience and letting go. Try a practical technique to weaken the inner critic's power. Give it a ridiculous name. It could be the grumpy old man, the nosy ant, or any comical villain you like. Next time you start beating yourself up over a mistake, say, it's just the grumpy old man complaining again. He can talk all he wants. I'm busy living my life." By turning it into something humorous and personified, you create detachment. You'll notice its threats suddenly sound absurd and lose their weight. In that moment, inner peace begins to return. Another example involves social pressure and social media. You're scrolling your phone and see friends posting about travel, promotions, weddings. Instantly, toxic comparison kicks in. Everyone is moving forward. I'm the only one stuck. This is when mental clarity is clouded by illusion. You're comparing other people's highlight reel with your own messy backstage. Practicing self-reflection here means recognizing that everyone has their own time zone. Just because flowers bloom in spring doesn't mean those that bloom in winter are inferior. When you're always tending someone else's garden, your own will fill with weeds. Returning to stillness, you begin to understand that your path is unique. You don't have to follow anyone else's timeline to feel worthy. Finally, remember the story of Thomas Edison. When his laboratory burned down, destroying the work of a lifetime, he didn't sit in the ashes and let the inner critic scream that he was a failure. He woke his son and said, "Go get your mother. She'll never see a fire this big again." The next morning, he said, "This disaster is wonderful. All our mistakes have been burned up. Now we can start again." That is stoic thinking at its finest. Not denying the pain, but choosing your attitude toward it. He didn't allow the external event to define his internal worth. He used failure as fuel for rebirth. Applied to your own life, every time you stumble, every time you feel not enough, remember, that is just data, not a sentence. You always have the power to rewrite your story starting from this very moment. Don't let the noise of judgment drown out the voice of your potential. Listen to it, smile at it, and then keep walking your own path with an open heart and a clear mind. We've just traveled a long road of exploration together. From dissecting the storms in the mind, recognizing the nature of our thought patterns, to facing the harsh inner judge within. But philosophy, no matter how profound, will always remain dead ink on paper if it isn't carried into the breath of real life. Understanding Stoicism or psychology is not the destination. It is the map. And now it's time to put on our shoes and start walking across the rugged terrain of reality. The most important question now is this: how can we, as modern people living in the whirlwind of deadlines, bills, social pressure, and informational chaos, maintain inner peace and inner strength without having to escape to a mountaintop? How do we turn abstract concepts like letting go or mindfulness into sharp, practical tools we can use right at our work desk or in our living room at home? The answer lies in a supreme principle, often described as a master key that opens the door to a new reality: the power of attention. 1. The architect of the soul. Attention shapes reality. Before we dive into specific practices, we need to understand one core operating rule of the brain. Where attention goes, reality follows. William James, the father of American psychology, once stated, "My experience is what I agree to attend to." This means your life is not defined by what objectively happens to you, but by what you choose to pay attention to. If you pour your attention into toxic thoughts, past mistakes, or fears about the future, then your reality will become a dark painting of anxiety and insecurity. Conversely, if you train yourself to redirect attention to what is happening right now, to small, good things, or simply to your breath, your reality will immediately shift into a state of peace. In the modern world, attention is the most fiercely contested resource. Social media, news, advertising, they're all engineered to hijack your focus, to pull you away from focus and clarity and drag you into a state of constant reactivity. When you lose control of your attention, you lose control of your life. So the first and most important practical step is this: take back control of your attention. Imagine your attention as the beam of a flashlight in the dark. You cannot change the surrounding darkness, objective difficulties, but you can absolutely choose where to shine the light. If you point it at the muddy puddle, negative thoughts, all you'll see is muck. But if you turn it toward the wildflower blooming nearby, positive aspects or solutions, your mind will be filled with beauty and hope. This is not blind optimism. It is a strategic choice to protect your mental health. 2. The stop and pivot strategy. To deal with overthinking and obsessive thought loops, we need an interrupt tool, a mental circuit breaker. The stop and pivot strategy works by breaking entrenched neural patterns. Step 1. Recognize when you begin to feel your chest tightening or your mind starts replaying disaster scenarios. Name it immediately. I'm slipping into overthinking. Don't judge it. Just recognize it. Step 2. Stop. Use a physical cue or a clear inner command. You might say out loud or silently, "Stop," or change your body's state. Stand up, get a glass of water, clap your hands. This action disrupts the automatic stream of thought. Step 3. Pivot. This is the crucial part. You cannot leave the mind empty or it will quickly refill with the same worries. You must give it a new object to focus on. Redirect your attention to a concrete action in the present moment. To your senses. Find 5 blue objects in the room, listen for 3 different sounds, or feel the contact between your feet and the ground. Activating your senses pulls you out of your head and returns you to physical reality. To gratitude. Immediately find 3 small things you feel grateful for right now. A good cup of coffee, cool air from the AC, a caring message from someone. Marcus Aurelius reminded us of the power of focusing on the present. Don't let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. By redirecting your attention to the present, you strip anxiety about the future of its fuel. You realize that in this exact moment, you are still okay, you are still breathing, and things are still within your control. 3. Writing to heal. Releasing stuck energy. In our earlier theory, we talked about facing rather than avoiding. One of the most effective emotional healing methods, scientifically backed, is journaling. Many of us keep toxic thoughts and fears bottled up because we're afraid to say them out loud. They become ghosts haunting the subconscious. Writing is the act of dragging those ghosts into the light. When thoughts are turned into words on paper, they lose their vague, monstrous quality. They become concrete, finite, and manageable. Practical exercise. Brain dump. Every morning or before bed, spend 10 minutes writing down everything that's running through your mind. Don't worry about grammar, spelling, or coherence. Just write. I'm worried about tomorrow's meeting. I'm angry about what that person said. I'm scared I'm not good enough. When you're done, look at the page. That is the separation. You are the one holding the pen. The worries are what lie on the paper. You are not them. After that, you can perform a small letting go ritual. Tear up the paper or cross out irrational thoughts. This sends a powerful signal to the brain. These thoughts have been processed. No need to keep them in short-term memory anymore. The result is a sense of immediate lightness, and mental clarity begins to return, building micro-stillness moments in daily life. A common mistake is thinking that to have stillness, we need a week-long retreat or an hour of meditation every day. In busy lives, in the US or any big city, this is often unrealistic. A more practical solution is to create tiny pockets of stillness sprinkled throughout the day. Here's how to apply it. Red light rule. Every time you stop at a traffic light, instead of getting impatient or checking your phone, Use those 30 to 60 seconds to take deep breaths and relax your shoulders. Turn dead waiting time into time that nourishes your inner peace. Between task, pause. When you finish an email and are about to move to the next task, pause for 1 minute. Close your eyes and watch your breath. Reset your focus and clarity before you begin again. Tech-free zones. Designate phone-free zones at home, for example, the dining table or bedroom. Protecting physical space is one of the best ways to protect mental space. These small, accumulated pauses help your nervous system cool down regularly, preventing stress from building up into burnout. They help you stay connected with yourself, even on the most chaotic days. 5. Talking back to the inner critic. Cognitive reframing. The practical way to deal with the inner critic is not to ignore it, but to logically challenge it. This technique in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is called cognitive reframing. When the inner voice declares, "You messed everything up, you're useless," pause and run a reality check. Based on thoughts are not facts. Where's the evidence? Is there real proof that you are completely useless? Or have you succeeded many times in the past? What's another perspective? If your best friend went through this same situation, what would you say to them? You'd likely say, "You just made a small mistake. Everyone does that." New conclusion. Replace the toxic thought with a more balanced one. I feel disappointed that I made a mistake, but it doesn't define who I am. I can learn from this. Repeating this process gradually rewires the grooves of thought in your brain. You shift from automatic self-punishment to constructive self-reflection. 6. Modern application. Stoicism in the digital age. We can't talk about practical application without addressing one of the biggest challenges of our era: the digital world. Social media is a massive machine that activates comparison, fear of missing out, FOMO, and insecurity. The inner critic constantly pulls data from glamorous Instagram photos or LinkedIn achievements to attack you. The Stoic application here is to practice the discipline of assent, mental discipline over what you agree to believe. When scrolling social media, always maintain an observing distance. When you see someone succeed, instead of letting envy arise, "They're better than me," redirect attention. "Good for them, but my path is different." When you see an outrage-inducing news post, ask yourself, "Is this within my control?" If not, practice letting go and scroll past. Don't let your emotions be hijacked by algorithms designed to addict you. Remember, in the digital age, your mental health depends on your ability to filter information. Clean up your social media like you would clean your house. Unfollow accounts that make you feel worse about yourself, and follow sources that bring inspiration, knowledge, and calm. Integration. The journey from knowing to living. Ultimately, applying these philosophies is not a one-time achievement. It's a way of life. You will never finish practicing mindfulness. There will be days you fail, days you get swept away by anger, days you drown in overthinking. That is completely okay. The only real difference between someone with a strong inner life and someone without isn't that they never fall. It's that they have the tools to get back up faster. They know how to return to the breath. They know how to step back from their thoughts. They know how to forgive their own imperfection. Seneca, the great Stoic teacher, once advised, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." See every difficult situation in life, a demanding boss, a traffic jam, a breakup, as a field exercise to train your mental muscles. Don't pray for a life without problems. Train for a mind that doesn't break in front of them. By patiently making small shifts in how we pay attention, how we react, and how we talk to ourselves, we gradually build an inner citadel, Inside that fortress, no matter how fierce the storms outside, the flame of clarity and peace keeps burning. And that is the ultimate meaning of self-development. Not to live a life of running away from suffering, but to understand it and transform it into strength. Hello. This is the content for Section 11, Optional. Counterpoints, challenges, alternative perspectives, a crucial part that brings balance, depth, and realism to the entire script. I have expanded the length, 600 words, not only to highlight the difficulties, but also to clarify common misunderstandings about Stoicism and mindfulness, helping the viewer feel understood and deeply empathized with. As we reach the final stretches of this journey into the mind, you might notice questions, or even resistance, arising within you. That is a completely natural and healthy reaction of critical thinking. We are not here to sugarcoat reality or sell you some magic pill that can erase all suffering instantly. To truly master your mental health and develop inner steadiness, we need the courage to look directly at the downsides, the challenges, and the dangerous misunderstandings that can arise along the way. One of the most common objections beginners have is, if I keep trying to control my reactions and stay calm, won't I turn into some emotionless robot? Many people mistakenly believe that Stoicism, or practicing stillness, means suppressing emotions, swallowing your tears, and pretending you're not in pain. This is a dangerous misunderstanding. Suppression and letting go are two completely opposite mechanisms. Suppression is when you feel anger but force it down into the depths of your subconscious, where it ferments and turns into toxic thoughts that destroy you from within. What we've been discussing today is the opposite: observation and transformation. You allow the emotion to arise, you feel it fully, but you do not let it take over your behavior. The goal is not to kill emotion, but to prevent emotion from clouding your mental clarity and your reason. Another very real challenge we cannot ignore is this: it's easier said than done. When life is calm, it's easy to sit down and remind yourself that thoughts are not facts. But when you're standing in the eye of the storm, losing your job, going through a breakup, or facing a financial crisis, the pressure of overthinking is overwhelming. In those moments, the inner critic will scream louder than any philosophical quote. We must acknowledge that training the mind is one of the hardest things a human being can do. It is not a light switch you can flip on and off at will. It is muscle training. You can't expect to lift 220 pounds the first day you walk into the gym. Likewise, you can't expect to have perfect inner peace the moment a storm hits, if you've never trained during sunny days. Failure, stumbling, and being swept away by emotion are inevitable parts of self-reflection. Don't punish yourself for not becoming a sage overnight. There is also another concern people often raise. If I just accept everything, if I'm always mindful and content with the present, won't I lose my drive to strive and to change the world? Is stillness the same as passivity and resignation? The answer is no. In fact, reality shows the opposite. Anxiety and inner chaos are rarely sustainable fuel for success. They more often lead to burnout. When you have focus and clarity, your actions become sharper and more precise. A surgeon who keeps a cool head saves more lives than one who panics. A leader with high self-awareness makes wiser decisions than someone driven purely by ego. Inner stillness is the strongest launchpad for powerful outer action. Finally, we need a careful look from a medical perspective. The emotional healing methods and cognitive shifts we've discussed are extremely helpful for the everyday psychological struggles of life. However, for those battling deep psychological trauma or chemical imbalances in the brain, willpower alone may not be enough. In such cases, professional medical help is essential. And these philosophies should serve as supportive tools, not as complete replacements for therapy or treatment. Even Seneca, a great master of Stoicism, openly admitted how difficult this path is. The path to virtue is rough at first, but it becomes easier as you walk it. Don't let the initial difficulty or your doubts discourage you. Simply recognizing these obstacles is already the first step in overcoming them. We are not chasing flawless perfection. We are pursuing daily progress in learning how to master the house of our own mind. Our journey today has not just been a lesson in psychology, but a homecoming to your truest self. We have peeled back the layers of toxic thoughts, seen through the deception of overthinking, and most importantly, we have found the golden key that unlocks the door to freedom. The deep understanding that thoughts are not facts. You are not the storms passing through your mind. You are the vast blue sky that holds them all. Mental health and inner strength do not come from trying to control the entire external world, but from your ability to maintain stillness and mental clarity right in the middle of the storm. Every time the inner critic speaks up, every time the pressure of life weighs on you, remember that you always have a choice. You have the power to pause, to practice, letting go, and to redirect your attention toward what is nourishing your soul. Modern life will continue with all its noise. Challenges will still come. But the difference now is that you hold in your hands the toolkit of Stoicism and mindfulness. You are no longer a helpless victim of your emotions. You are the architect of your own reality through the power of focus and clarity. Start with the smallest possible steps. Don't try to change your entire life overnight. If, in just one moment, you notice yourself thinking negatively and choose to smile at that thought instead of believing it, that alone is already a tremendous victory of self-awareness. Be patient with yourself, because emotional healing is a journey of love, not a race toward perfection. To close this video, I want to leave you with one final reminder from Emperor Marcus Aurelius. A declaration of the infinite power that already lives within you, just waiting to be awakened. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The only question that remains is, right now, as this video ends, where will you choose to direct your attention? Toward the fears of the past or toward the peace of the present moment? That power, and this entire life, rests completely in your hands. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you'll be notified of future videos. That small action not only helps the algorithm spread this message of healing to more people, but it is also your way of saying you're ready for a serious and sustainable self-development journey together with our community.